For a long time I thought about upgrading the suspension on my MT, and it's very difficult to find information on this. Not many people seem to have made content about it. The instruction manuals that come with the cartridge kits themselves don't give a huge amount of information, so I thought I'd produce a video that would hopefully be helpful for other people. And this process worked for me. My bike is amazing now. The forks are so much nicer than they were standard, so I'm hoping someone else finds this useful. I've kind of cobbled together all the information I found out from Andreani and forums on the internet and YouTube clips here and there, so hopefully you'll find this useful. Obviously, if you're not the most mechanically capable person, I would highly recommend having this kind of work done by a mechanic or someone you know to be competent, because obviously mucking around with something as fundamental as suspension can end very badly for you if you haven't done it right. So yeah, I'm just using this as a bit of a guide. Hopefully you can do it yourself. Just don't blame me if you do it yourself and your motorcycle explodes. This whole process is made infinitely easier by having an ABBA Skylift, so hopefully you can excuse the fact that I've cheaped out on a couple of the other tools in this process after having bankrupted myself buying a Skylift and the fork cartridge kit itself. I ride my bike year round, so you'll have to excuse the fact that it's completely covered in filth. I fitted this kit in January after riding through winter and with all the salt and crap on the roads. It pays to loosen the fork cap before you remove the fork from the bike. It's just a lot easier that way. Then it's just a case of loosening your upper and lower pinch bolts in order to be able to remove the fork itself. With the fork off the bike, you can now remove the fork cap and the spacer and the spring and empty out all that old fork oil. I used a picking tool to remove the dust seal, which worked remarkably well actually. And then used the same tool to remove the incredibly grotty fork retaining clip. I then removed the bolt at the bottom of the stanchion with a 10mm Allen socket. This is something I bought specifically for this job because you need something that's quite long in order to get in there, and these Allen key bits that I bought online were perfect. With the bolt removed, you can separate the fork from the stanchion with a short, sharp tug. The oil flow stopper here and these springs are going straight in the trash because they won't be used again. Removing the inner fork bushing can be a bit of a pain in the arse, so you kind of have to spread it a little bit with a flat blade screwdriver and then push it up out of its groove, which is easier said than done. So technically, if you look at the instructions for any of these fork cartridge kits, they'll tell you to machine off the end of the fork stanchion using a lathe, a metal lathe, which I don't know about you, but I don't have one of those lying around. And I think I saw a video of someone else who had used an angle grinder just to grind the end of the stanchion flat. So if you're careful and you do it nice and evenly, and you make sure you don't leave any sharp edges, you can use an angle grinder, and that's what I did for mine, and it's worked absolutely fine. You want to make sure you don't leave any sharp edges on the bottom here. I've done quite a lot of angle grinding, so I was able to keep it quite nice and smooth, but once you tap out the bung at the bottom of the fork, you can always sand it down with some sandpaper as well, just to make sure it's not too sharp. You also don't want too much heat building up in the stanchion, so I just made sure not to grind away for too long, just so I didn't have any issues with damaging the material, warping anything. So you can see I'm constantly kind of feeling the tube to make sure it's not getting too hot. And I just turned the fork in the vise constantly just to make sure I was trying to grind it down as evenly as I possibly could. Once I'd ground enough of the lip off, I could just tap the bung out from the other end. I just used a couple of extension bars connected together and a rubber mallet to knock it out. Then I reinstalled the inner fork bush. I decided to reuse mine because it still looked like it was in good condition. It's a lot easier to get back on than it was to get off, that's for sure. Then I installed the outer bushing and the washer. Then it's time to fit the new oil seal. I used the classic plastic bag over the end of the stanchion technique to get the oil seal on. Subsequently, I've bought myself a set of Motion Pro oil seal bullets, which make the job so much easier and just mean that you've got no chance of damaging your oil seal. So whatever you do, just be very careful about getting this back on the stanchion, because the last thing you want to do is damage your new oil seal, because then your seals will leak and you'll be taking it all apart again to do it again. Make sure you're putting the oil seal on the right way round as well. The little spring tends to be at the top of the oil seal. Then you're ready to put the two halves of the fork back together, and here's where I used yet another of my ghetto techniques. So I didn't have a fork seal driver at the time, so I did the electrical tape on the fork tube trick to hammer the seal home, which does work, but it is not the greatest way of doing this. And once again, since recording this, I've actually got hold of the proper tool for the job, which, trust me, makes it a lot easier. And whether you use a fork seal driver or this ghetto technique, basically you're looking to drive the oil seal home. You should be able to hear it change sound as it's seated properly. Essentially, you want to make sure you can see the little groove where the retaining clip sits. As long as you can get the retaining clip in there and have it snap into place, then you've driven the fork seal down enough. If the retaining clip won't seat, won't spring into its groove, you know that you haven't quite hammered the oil seal home enough. Now it's time to fit the fork cartridge. So this just slides into the stanchion and you fix it in place with the bolt at the bottom of the stanchion that you removed earlier. I screwed the fork cap back on just to hold the cartridge kit in place while I put the bolt in the bottom. As I mentioned earlier, you should feel the retaining clip spring into position if you've hammered your oil seal down correctly. And now we can fit the dust seal, and for this I used the same technique as the oil seal, using a plastic bag just so that it didn't get caught on the edge. It should be easy enough to push the dust seal into place just using your hands. Make sure it's seated all the way around. With that done, you need to torque the bolt to 30 Newton meters. Now it's time to set the oil height. I managed to get hold of a Motion Pro fork damper tool. This is useful for helping to bleed the fork as well as installing the spring later on. You need to make sure to bleed the fork as well, so you can do this by pulling up and down on the fork stanchion itself as well as the damper rod inside, and you're looking to make sure that there's no more bubbles or noises or squelches when you pull up, so it should just be a nice quiet sound as the oil moves inside. The fork oil tool works by removing any additional oil above the height that you set. So you can see here that I didn't have too much extra oil in the fork. So in the Andreani instructions it tells you to wind the adjustment all the way out and then wind it 4 turns in, and then you can make any adjustments you like from that point. And that's the same setting for both the rebound side and the compression side. Now what I'm trying to show you in this clip, which you can't quite see, is there's a little Andreani logo with an upwards arrow showing you which way to put the fork spring in. Then it's a case of putting in the spacer, and here's where yet another one of my cheapskate techniques came in, and I used a spanner just to compress the fork spring. This is a hell of a lot easier with a fork compressing tool, which again is another tool I finally got hold of, which would have been very useful here. It is possible to do it with a spanner. It's such a pain in the arse. You can't really tell in this video how annoying it was, but I would highly recommend getting yourself a fork compressing tool just to make your life a lot easier. And I really didn't have enough hands for this because I was trying to compress the spring using the spacer whilst pulling up on the fork tool whilst sliding the spanner in between the spring and the nut. So if I'd had 2 more hands it would have been a lot easier. With the spanner in place I could remove the fork damping tool and then screw on the fork cap. Apparently this doesn't need too much tension on it, so I just nipped it up so it was snug, and then I could take the spanner out. Then it was just a case of screwing the fork cap into the fork leg itself, and once again Andreani say this doesn't need a lot of tightening down, and it's an aluminium cap going into steel, so you want to be careful that you don't damage anything. At this point I set the preload by turning 4 rotations clockwise. Ideally what you need to do is set the sag on your motorcycle and adjust the preload accordingly, which I'll do at a later date. Then it's just a case of getting the fork back into the triple tree, and I took this opportunity to fit some fork gaiters as well to try and protect the stanchion, because I know from experience the lower part of that stanchion is exposed to loads of crap from the road, and I'd rather try and protect it if I can, and I think they look kind of neat as well. And the process is exactly the same for the other fork, so you can just repeat that whole process again, and then once you've got both forks in the headstock, it's time to obviously put the wheel back on and your calipers. I compressed the forks a couple of times before I torqued everything up, just to try and make sure everything was aligned and straight in the forks before I clamped it down. So there you have it. That's how to fit an Andreani fork cartridge kit to an MT-07. I hope you found that useful. I will look to make a review video of my experience of using the kit and making adjustments to it and what I like for the road. I've also got a track day coming up at the end of May, so I'll give a bit of feedback on how that was on a track day as well. I hope that was helpful, and I'll catch you later.